Hello again, everyone. Welcome to Washington Gun Law TV. I'm Washington Gun Law President William Kirk. Thanks for joining us. Hey, I complain a lot about living here in Washington, and I complain a lot because, well, candidly, Washington really kind of sucks as a state. And oftentimes I talk about how I get governor envy. I just really envy those who live in states where governors really look out for their citizens' rights and all that. And lately, well, my man crush has been on this particular governor. However, I may have a new one coming up because I like what I'm seeing out of the great state of Texas. I don't like the story. The story is a really disturbing story. I think it's going to end up with a just ending, but it's going to be a very long and arduous process for this individual to get there. I think it's an important lesson to learn here about a lot of things, and I think we should all pay attention to it. So, today, let's spend a few minutes to talk about when your governor understands your right of self-preservation. Okay, so the story I'm talking about today was actually brought to my attention by my 18-year-old kid who spends way too much time out in the Twittersphere. But he did find this story. I found it to be really, really interesting. It comes out of Travis County, Texas, or better known as the Austin area. The incident took place back in July of 2020. An indictment was not handed down until July of 2021, and a conviction for the crimes charged was just obtained. What happened? Well, Army Sergeant, that's right, United States Army Sergeant Daniel Perry, who was moonlighting as a driver for Uber in the Austin area in July of 2020, made the dreaded mistake of turning a corner and driving himself right into a George Floyd protest. Now, having been a Seattle resident living here in the summer of love or the summer of 2020, I can assure you that I had met many a people who accidentally made the wrong right turn or left turn thinking they were just moving along on a city street only to drive right into a protest. And sometimes that did not work out real well for them. The evidence here is a little conflicting, but as the story goes, the crowd became very angry at Sergeant Perry for turning towards their direction, came towards the car, and at that point, an individual named Garrett Foster, who was openly carrying an AK-47, apparently raised and pointed the firearm at Sergeant Perry. Sergeant Perry, who was also lawfully armed, lawful concealed carrier with a handgun, immediately took action, fired upon Mr. Foster, striking him and killing him. Now, there was some conflicting testimony, and I have not been able to obtain the transcripts from the trial yet, but in trying to read through the grapevines and reading several accounts of the story, there was some conflicting testimony. Number one, there was conflicting testimony about whether Sergeant Perry accidentally turned down that street or intentionally turned down that street. Number two, there was conflicting testimony about whether the victim, Mr. Foster, actually raised the firearm towards Sergeant Perry or whether he had merely just held it and displayed it. Number three, and this is one I was pretty easy to investigate, is the prosecution claim that there were some social media posts by Sergeant Perry that made it seem as though this would have been a premeditated act. Now, here's the social media post that they're talking about. It's a response to President Trump complaining about rioters, and he would not be the first person from Texas to say, hey, come on down here and find out what happened when you mess with Texas. And by the way, if you've ever studied the criminal justice system, you would know that you do not mess with the state of Texas. For those of you who spend any time studying capital offenses and the death penalty, you do know that if you go to the state of Texas and kill, they will kill you back. Now, what was called into question here, of course, was Texas's stand your ground laws, which, as you can imagine, are some of the strongest in the nation. Now, in general, stand your ground laws, castle doctrine, what we call in Washington State no duty to retreat, essentially says, listen, if you are lawfully in that location, you are under no duty to retreat, and you can use any reasonable force necessary to defend yourself. And Texas law, assuming it is anywhere similar to the law here in Washington State that I'm familiar with, is that if any person is in imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury, if they are facing potential lethal force, they have the right to use lethal force in their defense. So therefore, if Sergeant Perry accidentally turned down this road, not knowing that there was a protest down there, highly probable, and if that angry mob approached his car in a violent fashion, highly probable, and if an individual pointed a firearm at him, entirely possible, then Sergeant Perry would be within his lawful right to use lethal force as was done here. However, After 1 year, the Travis County Prosecutor, of a political orientation not that in tune with Second Amendment rights, was able to obtain an indictment. Now, there has been a lot of talk about the evidence that was presented at the grand jury and what law enforcement was told not to present to the grand jury to seek the indictment. However, after 8 days of a trial and 17 hours of deliberation, well, the jury convicted Sergeant Perry of murder. Sergeant Perry, who of course has no criminal history, is facing a minimum of 5 years in prison and up to a maximum of life in prison without the possibility of parole. However, it also appears that Texas Governor Greg Abbott has full intention on pardoning Sergeant Perry if given that opportunity. What do I mean by if given that opportunity? Well, apparently the way it works in the state of Texas is the governor can't just pardon anybody. Someone is going to have to recommend him to the governor's office for pardoning. Now, I'm certain that the reason that the governor made a big deal out of it and was very public with social media posts is that his invitation for someone to, in fact, refer that case to it. So the bottom line is this. Sergeant Perry was in the wrong place at the wrong time. So was Mr. Foster. This is a terrible case with a terrible ending where everybody had to go through a terrible ordeal that probably was unnecessary. The only good thing to come from this is that the final chapter for Sergeant Perry will probably be a chapter that's written in justice, only thanks to a governor who understands the right of self-preservation, that of course being Governor Greg Abbott of the great state of Texas. Listen, you may have more questions about this case or anything else related to what's left of our Second Amendment rights. You guys should know how to get a hold of Washington gun law by now, but if you don't, that's okay. All of that information is in the description box down below. In the meantime, I do want all of you to remember that part of being a lawful and responsible gun owner, like we talk about all the time here, is to know what the law is in every situation and how it applies to you in any instance that you may find yourself. Until next time, thanks for watching and stay safe.